Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video creation. I've made a YouTube tutorial as part of the Altenew Case Your Fellow Crafter. So I'm part of the Altenew Educator Certification Program, and we are casing each other, and it's a really good way to learn different techniques and find our favorite I suppose creation. Here is the picture from Cute Little Things 09 over on Instagram. She is completely utterly talented, and she has made such beautiful cards at her feet, so I hope you get to visit her over on Instagram. Now, for my stamp sets of choice, I've used the Kind Reminders stamp sets. Now in that, it comes with stencils, it comes with dies. I actually just end up using the stamp set. I've got watercolor cardstock as well from Ranger. I've got a Misty to help. I've got white card bases, and the white card base will end up being a 5x7. I've also used the Courageous Use stamp set, which I bring later on. I've got the primary ebony embossing powder from WOW, and also their ultra slow drying ink. I've got also, I'm going to make it a watercolor card just like on Instagram, and I'm using the Altenew watercolor brush markers, the Spring Garden set. Now, because I'm still finding my way, you'll find my most go-to method when it comes to watercoloring is to heat emboss, and it kind of makes coloring easier for me when I want to stay in the lines. So the primary ebony powder is a jet black powder, and I'm going to use that as my focal point and heat emboss with this floral image here. Now I'm performing CPR on my stamp set, and I'm going to heat set that. Now I've got a WOW embossing tool, the heat tool, and I'll use heat setting 2 for today. This is watercolor cardstock, so it does take a little bit longer to dry, to heat set on, because it's a thicker material, but not too much. This is a fine detail stamp, so the powder melted really quickly away. And make sure, my biggest tip is to make sure you put your heat tool on first, have it on for about 10 seconds max, then start heat setting. This also prevents any warping or a lot of warping on your cardstock. So a nice prepped heat tool always helps with the heat embossing process. I'm going to be using the Sea Breeze and Dusk from the Spring Garden watercolor markers set. I'm actually just going to put a little bit of blob on a ceramic plate here. I use some ceramic plates when it comes to watercoloring. It's just easier to pick up. The slick surface allows me to pick up ink. Now, these are the first time me using it, and this is why it had a clear tip. So I'm squeezing the pigment out, and let me tell you, these are next level highly pigmented. I am so glad I used 2 aqua brushes, one to pick up the ink and the other to make it clear and to help with the blending process. I barely touched this ink, the tip of the ink, and it went a long way. It didn't even look like I barely touched the actual blob itself that's on the right hand side. Now, I don't know if you took note, but I actually saturated the floral image first with just water and just brushing along with my aqua brush, the clear, just to help that saturation. What I personally like is the blooming effect. Now, I do try to make that effect and just maximize that usage, and it makes the actual flowing of the watercoloring really flow better into each other, if that's the right way to explain it. I switch between the blue inks. I tend to use the darker ink when I really wanted to add more depth into certain part of the petals. I keep the whole process of this colouring in today's tutorial just so you kind of see the overall colouring result that I achieved. So I did double speed this up because I don't want to bore you all, but what I highly recommend is when you find good watercoloring pigments, it does the majority of the work for you, and it's just about moving and manipulating the ink over your surface. It helps too having good cardstock. So I love bright white. I've got some Strathmore in a more creamy kind of colour, but I'm tending to gravitate towards the more bright white cardstock. So once I've just finished with the actual bloom of the floral, I will work on the petal part, which you will also see as well. Now, this whole process did take me about, just this colouring was about a 20-minute process. I will be real, it did take a little bit longer, but I find the watercolouring process really, really therapeutic. I find it's my go-to method when I just want to sit and craft, or I'm lost and I feel like I haven't found my mojo, I've lost my mojo somewhere along the lines. I will just heat emboss an image and just play and watercolor with it, and it's such a relaxing just a relaxing tool for me to do when I need to wind down after work, especially that I work full-time and I have 3 kids. They all keep me on my toes. Beautiful kids, but they definitely, you know, I'm a busy mama bear, that's for sure. So what I've got is I've also got a black pigment ink. I didn't have a watercolor one, so I've just used a ink refill, and that was from Catherine Puller, and I've just pulled that along and colored with that. I wasn't doing much shading, so I didn't feel like I needed to do too much watercoloring methods into my coloring for the leaves. Now I've got a Dilutions Black Magic spray here, and I've got a little, just a bit of acetate to protect the actual image, and as I swirled that I actually smudged a little bit of that black pigment, but I just left it the way it is. Now my biggest tip is when it comes to the splattering effect is I use another pen or another, like just another type of hard surface that is pen-like, just for that impact to get that sprinkled effect. Now I've got some white acrylic paint here as well, and I'm going to add some white splatters. So I put some of the blue ink, the actual black ink, and then now the white ink. So it gives it a little bit of a speckled effect, and I really liked how this turned out. And again, the inspiration was from the lovely Cute Little Buttons Instagram. I hope you do follow her. I will put the link in my description below. Cute Little Things Instagram. Her name is Yasmine, and beautiful projects. Now I'm going to use my heat setting one for that heat tool because I did not want my cardstock to warp. I also had a microfiber cloth, I don't know if you've noticed, underneath that, just to protect my surface. I'm going to prep a black strip of cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss the sentiment. The sentiment says, "You are great," and that was from the Courageous You stem set. Now the embossing powder I'm going to choose is from the new WOW trio. I'm going to be using the Egyptian turquoise. It's got a blue undertone, which, because it was transparent, you didn't get to really see it on this black cardstock. However, you really got to see the gold pop through. So it actually heat embossed, and it looked almost mottled, that mottled type effect, like a distressed, and it was beautiful. I'm loving the new trios as well. Now I'm just going to make sure I covered all the letters. Heat set that on heat setting 2 this time, and it's just like magic watching heat embossing, isn't it? Every time it's like magic. Now, once I've finished heat setting that, I trim this down. I put it on my card and I realized, a bit too thick. How am I going to do it? I'm going to trim it. So I trim it down, and I also trim it down on an angle. So it gives it like almost a little feature. I've got my guillotine here. And I realized this was still too big. So then I gave it a little bit of a shave down again. Here I am thinking about, I'm not feeling it. Now I definitely cut that smaller, and I was much happier with the size of this sentiment here. And that's today's card creation. I hope you like my tips and techniques that I shared with you along the way. We, as part of the participant program, we're all casing each other. So visit our Instagrams. I will share as much social media on to follow in my description below. And I'll share this on Instagram as well. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a lovely crafting day.